Well, here we are in letter number 3, and in this letter, Screwtape is talking to Wormwood about how to poison the relationship between the patient and his mother. Now, some readers, when they see this, they can't think back to the 1940s and realize that the situation is a little different in the 1940s than it is now. They see this guy living with his mother, and they wonder, is he just kind of out of work? Is he living in the basement and playing video games all the time? Remember, in the 1940s, it is very common for people to be taking care of their relatives. It's very common for mothers, fathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles to be living with the younger generation. C.S. Lewis himself, during World War I, had promised one of the guys in his squad that if either one of them died, the other would take care of his family, take care of his parents. In Lewis's case, his father. In this other guy's case, his mother. The guy's name was Patty Moore, and in fact, he died during World War I. So for a number of years, C.S. Lewis took care of this fellow's mother. And there's a great deal of speculation that in the Screwtape letters, this woman who's talked about living with the patient is more or less reminiscent of the woman that C.S. Lewis took care of for a number of years, really until she died. This is a woman who we are told is older and has rheumatism and tends to be on the sharp-tongued and cranky side. One of the things sometimes we don't appreciate about people as they're growing older is that physically they're not all that comfortable. They can be in a lot of pain. Now, what Screwtape tells Wormwood to do is to feed the irritation that is going to be natural with these two folks living together. And the way that he's going to do that is by inflaming the patient's sense of the problems with his mother and having him be less aware of his own moral problems. So it works something like this. One of the things, for example, that Screwtape recommends is have the patient pray for her soul and never for her rheumatism. Now, some readers read that and they say, well, but isn't it good that he prays for her soul? Well, if he's praying for her soul, Screwtape points out, chances are what he's going to be focusing on is her faults. So sort of like the way that sometimes people will say, I'm praying for you, and it almost implies you're a sinner. It's almost a kind of a cut down. And so what Screwtape is doing by having her focus on the soul, leading the patient away from focusing on the rheumatism, which is actually a big part of why it is that this woman is probably as irritable and sharp-tongued as she is. She's in a lot of pain. In other words, praying for her soul is going to allow the patient to look down on her. Praying for her rheumatism would actually allow the patient to sympathize with her. The other thing that Screwtape recommends is have this guy get into a state where he can practice self-examination for an hour and be oblivious to the things that would be obvious to anyone who was around him for 5 or 10 minutes. This might seem as though it would be hard to pull off, but we're all aware of how it is that people can't hear themselves. People don't have a sense of what they look like or sound like to others. So the way that somebody could sort of go on and on, I don't talk too much, do I? Do you think I talk too much? She said I talk too much, but I don't think I talk too much. And on and on and on and on. They have no idea of what they sound like. There are ways, in fact, in which self-knowledge can be actually very difficult. Why is it that, for example, when you hear your voice on a recording, you're startled? Haven't you been hearing yourself all your life? Why is it that when you see a film of yourself and you see yourself walking around, you can be taken by surprise? Haven't you been around yourself for years and years? There are ways in which it's hard to get a perspective on oneself. And so that's what self-examination and self-reflection is about. Having a real sense of who you are and what your weaknesses and flaws are. Sometimes we really need other people to help us with that. That's why spiritual direction can be so important to the spiritual life. Well, what's the goal here? Is the goal that somehow you're going to have the patient and his mother so angry with each other that they'll kill each other, that it'll be a suicide homicide or homicide suicide, that they'll both end up dead strangling each other. That isn't necessary. There doesn't have to be spectacular wickedness for Screwtape and Wormwood to achieve their goal. All they need is for these people to become morally worse over time in the way that they behave around each other. So that Screwtape and Wormwood, together with this lady's accompanying devil, that they can get each one of them to be annoyed by the other and think that the other is deliberately doing it, at the same time that they themselves are doing things that the other finds annoying and believe themselves completely innocent. What is this going to create? It's going to create impatience. They're not going to put up with the other person, and they're always going to see what they do in the worst light. And it's going to create self-righteousness, that they're always thinking that they're innocent, that they've contributed in no way to the friction that exists between them. So that is a way of making people morally worse. They don't have to kill each other. They don't have to physically assault each other. It's just enough that they're acting in ways that are contrary to the love of neighbor, and doing this in ways that they themselves are completely unaware and completely convinced of their own innocence. So, in our next letter, what we'll do is look at the ways that Screwtape recommends to Wormwood to sabotage prayer.